Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to go over 21 bits of advice that I would give to my 18-year-old self. Let's get into it. Firstly, think about the game that you're playing and think about what are the victory conditions of that game. When you were in school, then the game was very much a game of trying to get really good exam results to trying to get into university. But when you go to university, that is probably not the game that you're going to continue to play. And you might fall into the trap of continuing to try and play that exam results game because it's just what you've known. But it's one of those things that if you are going to play that game, and there's nothing wrong with playing that game, but if you're going to play it, you want to do it intentionally rather than accidentally. And this question of what game am I really playing, it's actually quite a good one to keep asking yourself every few months, just to make sure you're still playing the game that you thought you were playing, and that crucially that you still want to be playing the game that you have found yourself playing. Because to be honest, that decision that you took when you were 16 to go to medical school, you don't need to hold yourself to that decision for the rest of your life. And you absolutely can and should ignore the sunk costs and just think, what's the game I'm playing right now? And is this the game that I really want to be playing? Secondly, you should try and develop some skills that you know are going to compound over the long term. Now, this is something that you won't appreciate when you're 18 because you're going to be just thinking about the short term and you're going to be thinking, like everyone does, in their own interests in the here and now. But you really want to start doing things at 18 or even younger than that. But you want to start doing things at 18 that are going to compound over time. Firstly, please pay attention to your posture. That is one of those things that when you're 18 and you're spending hours and hours sitting on the computer hunched over like this because you're cool, you won't see any problems when you're 18. You won't have any pain, you won't have any issues like that. But further down the line, maybe when you're 26, you might be thinking, damn, my posture is really crap and I wish I'd corrected this 8 years ago. Point number 3, you really want to be taking lots more photos than you think you should. Because again, you won't notice it at the time and you might think it's a bit of an inconvenience taking photos of stuff, but your university years are never going to come again. And in the future, you're always going to be so glad of the memories that you recorded by taking photos at events and taking photos even of your friends as you're having chills in your room. Point number 4, you really want to be more of a documentarian of the stuff that you're consuming and the stuff that you're creating, i.e. please, when you read a book or when you read an article or when you listen to a podcast or when you read, I don't know, the 4-Hour Workweek or something like that. When you read these books, please write some notes about what your thoughts and feelings were as you were reading them. Again, it's one of those things that you probably won't appreciate at the time because you'll think, oh, I've read this book, I just want to go on to the next one. But if you just take even 10 or 15 minutes to consolidate your thoughts and to think about, okay, what did I actually learn from this? And how have my feelings, how's my reactions, how's my behavior changed as a result of reading this thing or listening to this podcast, then that is actually going to help you in the present moment, but it's also going to be really interesting to look back on in the future. And even better, if you put those things on a public website, then that is going to get domain value and then your own brand will start to grow much more quicker than it actually did because you were just taking the time to document the things that you were learning along the way and doing your best to try and help others. Point number 5, try and be a connector or a hub that helps connect different people and different friendship groups. You're going to have a lot of anxiety and insecurity going into university about making friends. You're going to be worried that you're not going to make friends. You're going to be worried that no one's going to like you. Firstly, take heart because literally everyone suffers from those anxieties when they go to university as well. But secondly, realize that any friendship group needs someone to bring them together and be okay with being that person. Be okay with being the person to set up a WhatsApp group for a group of friends. Be okay with taking the first step towards inviting people to your room to hang out. Be okay with organizing an event. Be okay with all that kind of stuff because everyone, when they're in that position, they want someone to take charge and you can absolutely be that person if you want. Point number 6, you're going to do a pretty good job of putting yourself out there at university. You're going to join all these clubs and all these mailing lists and all these societies and you're going to go to all these events and recognize that while that's all very good, there's always more that you could be doing. And if it's a choice between sitting in your room one night, watching the Vampire Diaries, or, making the extra effort to get dressed and go to that event that maybe you've been putting off, please go to the event. Again, it's one of those things where the individual event that you go to probably won't matter. But the more you expose yourself to other people in a non-weird way, the more your surface area for serendipity will just increase and you're going to find yourself meeting people and making friends in the unlikeliest of circumstances. But the way that you can essentially optimize that luck in your favor is by putting yourself out there more than you currently are. Point number 7, get a doorstop. Those things are fantastic. They wedge your door open and keep your door wedged open at all times. Maybe not when you're asleep, but basically at every other time, and actively encourage people to come to your room and actively encourage people to interrupt you while you're trying to study because you're never going to remember those extra few bits of productivity that you had. But if someone feels comfortable enough to come over to your room at 11 o'clock at night just to have a bit of a chat, those are the conversations that compound into friendships further down the line. And those are the things you're going to be more grateful for, rather than the fact that maybe you got an extra 0.1% on that essay that you're working on. Point number 8, don't be mean to people. You will only ever regret it. Point number 9, buy some Bitcoin and absolutely do not, under any circumstances, try and sell it. Point number 10, nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m. You're going to really enjoy hanging out with people until 4 or 5 in the morning. Recognize that up until 2 a.m., those hangouts are useful. After 2 a.m., those they fall off a cliff and nothing good ever happens, and you just want to sleep. You want to kick people out of your room and go to bed, because then you won't completely waste the next day with this sort of effectively a hangover from staying up until 6 in the morning and then getting 2 hours of sleep. That is proper grim. Nothing good ever happens after 2 a.m. Point 11, do a little bit of work, a little bit of studying every day. When you're 19, you're going to discover the magical power of something called active recall and spaced repetition. And the way that our memory works is that it's like if we do a little bit of something every day over a very long period of time, that's far more likely to end up in a long-term memory. Whereas if you do a burst of work, try and cram for a test or for an exam, like that stuff is absolutely not going to stick in the long term. And when you get to actually being a doctor and someone like a surgeon that you're working with asks you a question about anatomy, you're going to kick yourself and you're going to wish that, damn, I really wish I'd done a little bit of work every day and I would have kept up my knowledge of anatomy or kept up my knowledge of physiology, because you know that you knew it at one point, but it's not going to come to you when it really counts further down the line. So again, a little bit of work every day goes a very, very long way. Firstly, towards helping you in your exams, but more importantly, towards giving you that knowledge that you can then have as a foundation for the rest of your life. Point number 12, seek forgiveness rather than permission. At some point, you might get the idea to start a particular business or a website or even a YouTube channel. Seek forgiveness rather than permission. Don't feel like you have to email the university to ask them for permission to do a thing, or email your college tutor to ask, is it okay if I do this? Just do it. And if they have a problem with it, you can always seek forgiveness further down the line. Point number 13, please, please, please stop worrying about what other people think of you, because they're really not thinking of you. You're going to walk around, you're going to go to all these events, and you're going to think people are looking at you and judging you and caring about what you're doing. They're really not. Everyone has got their own anxieties. Everyone has their own problems. Most of the people, like 30% of the people that you're going to meet are struggling with their own mental health problems that you're never going to know about until like 10 years down the line. So don't worry so much about other people judging you, because they're really not. People are nice. People are friendly. People are just worried about themselves. So you do you, and stop worrying about it so much. Point number 14, whenever you're really struggling with something, ask yourself, how hard should this really be? And how hard can it be? And something that Tim Ferriss likes to say, what would this look like if it were easy? When you're in your first year of medical school at Cambridge, you're going to think it's a big deal. You're going to think, oh my God, I'm a first year medical student at Cambridge University. That's a big deal. This should be really hard. And you're going to convince yourself that it's really hard, and you're going to sabotage yourself, because you're going to be acting in a way as if this thing is harder than it actually is. And then by the time you get to your second year, you're going to realize that, oh, actually this isn't so bad. And a big part of the anxieties that I had around it in my first year, a big part of those were actually because I just worked myself up, and my mindset was approaching this as if it's going to be hard. Point number 15, it's absolutely okay to skip lectures. Oftentimes the lecturers just read out from the lecture notes anyway, and you'll have the lecture notes. And if you want, you can just go to a cafe or a coffee shop or a restaurant, and you can just go through the lecture in your own time. That's completely chill. Just make sure you don't try and summarize it, because taking notes, as you're going to find out when you read the book, make it stick. And when you discover the evidence-based study tips, you're going to realize that taking notes is a waste of time for the most part. So don't try and summarize your lecture notes, but also don't feel like you have to go to the lectures. Point number 16, it's absolutely okay to fall behind with your university work during term time. Your terms are going to be 8 weeks long. That is not a lot of time. And you're going to keep up for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and then you're going to start falling behind and behind and behind. And you're going to feel really bad about this, because you're going to think, oh my God, I'm such a waste man. Everyone else around me is keeping up, whereas I am really falling behind. Firstly, don't worry, 90% of the year group is also falling behind. They're just pretending they're not. But secondly, your holidays are really long, and there's nothing really to do in the holidays other than go to the local library with your friends from school and all study together. And that's actually quite fun. So it's okay to fall behind during term time. During term time, you have all these societies, you have all these fun things that you could be doing. So don't prioritize work over the social stuff, because it's only for 8 weeks. You can prioritize work during the holidays. Point number 17, when you read this book, The 4-Hour Workweek, you're going to realize that you can develop sources of passive income. Please, 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 when you have that thought process, run with it and try and do those things, because further down the line, at the start when you're 18 and 19, you're going to be putting so much effort into making these websites and these projects, and you're not going to see any returns for a very long time. But 8 years down the line, you're going to be so glad that you spent a little bit of time in your university years trying to do these extra projects to make yourself a bit of money on the side. And to be honest, it's not even about the money. It's more about the skills that you gain during that process. You know, trying to make something and trying to charge money for it is one of the best learning experiences in life in general. And you're going to see this time and again as you try more and more projects throughout your university years. So when it comes to making money from this sort of stuff, don't obsess over it, but also don't treat it as something evil, because you know, the art of trying to monetize something will itself teach you so many lessons. Point number 18, really try your best to enjoy the journey and not focus so much on the destination. University is going to be the best time of your life, and it's only really going to happen once. And it would be a shame if you look back on that time and you think, damn, I was so focused on trying to climb that, you know, the greasy pole of achievement. I was so focused on trying to get to that first class or get to slightly higher marks that I forgot to enjoy myself while I was there. And you know, it's totally okay to have goals. It's totally okay to shoot for things like, I want to get a first class, I want to go for rank 1, I want to do all this kind of stuff. But just don't forget to, you know, as they say, smell the roses on the journey. As Brandon Sanderson would say in the Mistborn series and the Stormlight Archive, by the way, you should read those sooner than you did. Life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Point number 19, share your work and yourself with your friends without any expectation of something in return. You're going to realize this a few months into university, that everything becomes so much easier when you work together with your friends and you treat the exam as your collective enemy, rather than viewing it as like a single player game that you're playing and competing with other people. There's really no need to compete with your friends or compete with your year group. Instead, think of it as a collaborative endeavor. And when you're sharing stuff, don't worry about tit for tat. Don't worry about like, I shared this essay plan with John and then John didn't share something with me. Just like share openly. You're gonna look back on that time and you won't even remember like, you know, what was the essay John gave you, but you will remember the feeling of camaraderie that you're gonna have with your medical student colleagues when you're all kind of working together and sharing resources amongst one another. Point number 20, really carve into your heart the serenity prayer, which is, God grant me the strength to accept that which I cannot control, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Basically, don't worry about the stuff that's outside of your control, because it's going to cause you undue stress and anxiety and worry. Instead, focus on the things that you can control and focus on doing what you can to make them better. And finally, point number 21, please learn how to study efficiently for your exams. You're going to waste hours, days, and weeks, and even months using ineffective study techniques. You're going to think that rereading your notes is useful. You're going to think that summarizing your notes is helpful. You're going to think that highlighting in pretty colors is going to be useful. What you don't realize is that when you're 18, what you don't realize is that there's a huge amount of scientific evidence around what makes effective studying, and you really want to try and learn it sooner rather than later. If you want to learn this effective studying stuff, the best thing you can do is check out my class on Skillshare, who are very kindly sponsoring this advice video. Now, this class is absolutely fantastic because it's like 5 hours worth of content and it piles absolutely everything that I now know 8 years later about how to study effectively using evidence-based techniques and strategies. If you want to check this class out, you should be one of the first 1,000 people to hit the link in the video description, because that will give you a free trial to Skillshare. And then during your free trial, you can watch all 5 hours of this class, and then you can suddenly immediately have the superpower of being able to effectively and productively study for your exams. While you're there, you might as well check out the other classes that I've got on Skillshare as well. There are 2 of them themed around productivity and how to live a more productive life, which is something I know you're into. And there's a really long one about how to use flashcards, specifically the app Anki, to really supercharge your medical school knowledge. And you're going to be really glad that you discover Anki further down the line, but you're going to wish that you used it for anatomy and biochemistry and physiology sooner rather than later. All of those classes and thousands more are available on Skillshare, so be one of the first 1,000 people to hit the link in the video description. And then after your trial ends, the annual premium subscription to Skillshare is less than $10 a month. You spend more than $10 a month on pointless subways and pointless coffee and pointless takeaway. You absolutely can and should spare that $10 a month to buy a Skillshare premium subscription. It's literally so good. And going back to point number 2, which is learn skills that compound over time, there's like tons and tons of stuff that you can learn on Skillshare that you're not going to learn at university. So please spend some time during your university years investing in yourself, invest in a Skillshare subscription, and hit the link in the video description to get free access to my class about how to study for your exams effectively and efficiently. Oh, and one more thing, another piece of advice that I forgot to give is that you really want to get started with investing your spare money in stocks and shares. You're going to make a website and it's going to make a bit of money, but you're going to do the stupid thing and just have that money sitting in your bank account depreciating over time. Instead, what you need to do is start investing it in stocks and shares as soon as you possibly can. 18 is not too young, 14 is not too young, 11 is not too young. Basically, the earlier you can get started, the more you leave time for that money to compound over time. If you want to learn how to actually get started with investing, I know it's quite complicated. It feels like a black box to you right now, but please click that video over there, which is my ultimate guide to how to get started with investing and make, again, that investment in your future. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great life, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.